about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
This is a monster. And look at the horizontal rain, the wind, all the rotation inside this cell. All right. It makes me nervous when his feed pauses like that.
Just crossed the road right there.
And look, you can see how the street signs as they start to, gosh, just cross the road. How fast is this tornado moving? What?
50 miles per hour.
50 miles an hour?
40. Wow.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. We are under a once-in-a-generation weather modification attack. Those images that you saw were obviously not natural, and the things going on around the country right now in regards to this 4-day, once-in-a-generation weather event is clearly not something that is naturally occurring. Of course, the government is going out of their way to distract you with tariff wars and who's visiting the White House, people's 401ks and the crashing of the economy, which does tie in to the globalist plan to kill off the middle class. But what nobody talks about is weather modification. And if you listen to anybody out there that you believe is giving you truth and they don't talk about or at least believe or acknowledge the government's ability to manipulate and control the weather, whether it's things through HAARP, 5G towers, or NEXRAD, then they're likely a government operative. If you think about war and you think about how war actually works, normally in warfare, specific targets are targeted and hit. And when you see what we're seeing right now, where they're telling you, and I'll show you momentarily, how your Sinclair Broadcasting Group, your Tavistock Institute operates, because they're all reading off the same script, trying to convince you that they can predict the weather, but they can't control the weather, and let you know ahead of time that it's a once-in-a-generation event so that you don't actually start thinking that this is really, really strange weather behavior. You know, like what we're seeing where hurricanes, tornadoes are targeting the specific spot and then returning the next day and returning the next day. And then, of course, returning again for a fourth day and leaving you with flash floods, right? It sounds a lot like how war works. You target a specific area and you bomb it and go after it. And for anybody out there who doesn't believe that weather control and weather modification is real and can be used, it's only because you've been deceived with psychological catchphrases and mind control techniques to tell you that you can't control Mother Nature, right? I love it. They tell you can't control Mother Nature, but they somehow could tell you days in advance of these weather storms that are coming. And of course, conveniently now, Donald Trump is saying that he's going to fire, or he is firing all of those weathermen and those weather services. That's, of course, so they can hit you with more pop-up storms so that you're not prepared in the future. But nobody, including Trump, including Jones, including any of the alt-right media, will talk about weather modification. They won't talk about this document, weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. Well, if you haven't checked your calendar, it is 2025, and they do own the weather. In fact, they've even patented hurricane and tornado control devices, which I've shown you over the years. And if you don't believe me, why don't we listen to the guy that most conservatives are focused in on, John F. Kennedy, and the person who likely was involved in his death, or if you believe he actually died, one way or the other, the person they're saying is responsible or had his hand in it, Lyndon V. Johnson. Why don't you listen to both of them, since they're in the public eye right now, talking about weather modification and weather control. And he who will control the weather in the future will control the world.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
So that's like, what, 80 years ago, when they're talking about he who controls the weather will control the world? But that's something that people hear and they can't grasp because they've been trained to think that it's normal for these people to somehow predict weather patterns days in advance, but not have the actual ability with all of the technology that they have to actually create hurricanes, create tornadoes. We've seen obviously in Dubai that they even admit to cloud seeding, geoengineering, and having the ability to make rain. But it seems to get past people because they don't think people could be this sadistic and this wicked that they would take something like that, a silent weapon, and use it during a quiet war. If you haven't realized, these are silent weapons that are being used, and so are a lot of the psychological silent weapons as well that they're using, like radiation, poisoning, and everything else that they're hitting us with microwave frequencies. But this is a quiet war that's going on. You realize that they want you to think that there's a war going on between Democrats and Republicans, but the real war is the quiet war, the one no one's talking about how our government uses weather modification and other weapons in the skies to poison us and kill us. So everybody needs to get past the thinking that this bizarre weather stuff, because everybody's noticing that it's bizarre. Tornado Alley is no longer Tornado Alley. These tornadoes are happening at a time of year that they never happened before. And people are ignoring it because they're doing other things to distract you, like the tariff wars and all this other stuff, which does play into the New World Order agenda. People do need to pay attention to it. And naturally, if people are losing their 401ks or their life savings, they're going to pay attention to that and go into, a deep spiral of depression because they realize that they're losing all their savings because they trusted in a rigged stock market. So naturally, their attention's going to be on that, but their attention needs to be on this. Once in a generation storm turns deadly. Listen to this narrative, okay? And remember, HAARP, NEXRAD, 5G towers. There's tons of videos out there where they show scientists in laboratories creating mock hurricanes, creating mock tornadoes. Why in the world anyone wouldn't think they could do it on a mass scale is incredible to me. But what's even funnier is that people put on the news and they think that these people are journalists, and they're journalists who are investigating and giving you information. Well, they're certainly not investigating much because they sit in studios all day because they're actually actors, not anchors. And their job is to condition you. And right now, all across America, they're using the same script. Remember all those Sinclair Broadcasting scripts that you've seen where they repeat themselves over and over and over again? Well, here they are conditioning you that this is a once-in-a-generation storm because they don't want you to be suspicious about the movement and direction of it, how tornadoes and floods are happening at the same time, how it's like two hurricanes hitting at once, the amount of rainfall, and how specifically this once-in-a-generation storm is targeting the same location for multiple days in a row, almost like you would hear in warfare. If you were trying to wipe out a specific location on a map, you would send missiles in, right? And send troops in, and you would do it until the job was done. Well, that's exactly what's occurring now. Listen to them repeat the same script because they all get fed the same script, and then this script is supposed to program you into thinking, holy crap, this is a once-in-a-generation thing. So my brain is processing it as if it's not going to happen again, even though a few years ago they used the same exact script in the same exact places, like Arkansas, as you can see on the screen, from 5 years ago, once-in-a-generation historic flooding. Well, they're using the same script, and they use the same script to condition you into thinking that this is normal so that your brain accepts it. And of course, this programming ties in to all of the propaganda you've heard about climate change and strange weather behavior and jet streams going in the opposite direction, right? They're using weather modification to target specific areas and wipe people out, forcing people out of their homes to move into specific zones that they want to move them in. It is war that's occurring right now that, of course, the alt-right media is not talking about. Here they are all reading off the same script.
Authorities are calling a multi-day, life-threatening storm across multiple states, from Texas all the way up to Michigan and then moving east. The National Weather Service tonight warning millions to prepare for this. This system already triggering violent weather. But the main line of storms and potential tornadoes hit after dark tonight, and then days of heavy rain and life-threatening flooding. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Zee, she's live in the storm zone with the forecast in a moment, but ABC's Victor Akendo here with the images already. He's in Paducah, Kentucky tonight.
Tonight, a dangerous and potentially deadly multi-day severe weather outbreak is underway. Families in the heartland bracing for dangerous tornadoes and flooding so extreme, the National Weather Service is calling it a once-in-a-generation weather event.
A once-in-a-generation flood event and tornado outbreak is setting up across the lower Mississippi and Ohio valleys this week.
Portions of the Midwest and South are in the bullseye of what forecasters fear could be a generational storm.
Forecasts are warning of a once-in-a-generation storm. Experts are calling the rare combination of tornadoes and flooding a once-in-a-generation event. As ABC's Rena Roy reports, this is expected to last for several days.
At least one person was killed after tornadoes hit parts of the South and the Midwest. And this is part of what some forecasters are calling a once-in-a-generation storm.
About severe storms and tornadoes causing extensive damage in the Midwest and the South. And now forecasters are warning of a once-in-a-generation storm.
Forecasters are warning that this storm system could be a once-in-a-generation event. It won't be done for days.
Amid what the National Weather Service termed a once-in-a-generation flooding event.
So the National Weather Service says areas most at risk could see more than 15 inches of rain over the course of the storm, further warning of the possibility of, quote, generational flooding.
A once-in-a-generation extreme weather event slamming millions of people with a rare combination of tornadoes and catastrophic flooding expected to hit the same areas of the heartland.
These are two of the worst-case scenarios happening at the same time for the same cities.
And I could have continued on. I mean, that's just a handful of them. I'm saving your stomach from having to listen to more and more of these government operatives who pretend to be journalists. Of course, they like to invert things and tell everybody that we're not journalists who don't investigate anything and we make fake news, but they literally sit in the studio and read off of the same script and they speak the same way because that's what a hypnotist does. And they're all trained in hypnotism and mind control. They're government operatives. So, tornadoes, floods threaten the Midwest for consecutive days as storms wallop the region and the South. Listen specifically to these two paragraphs that I pulled out of these national news articles. The National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency, the most severe type of warning that exists in Arkansas, meaning there was a large tornado on the ground causing damage in a populated city. It goes on to say, it's considered rare to have the same city in at least a 3 out of 5 severe weather risk for 4 consecutive days, with Pine Bluff, Arkansas having the dubious distinction. In addition to the 4 consecutive days of severe weather, there will also be 4 consecutive days of torrential rain, and that will lead to potentially historic flooding in parts of the South and Midwest, forecasters warn. Forecasters attributed the violent weather to daytime heating, combining with an unstable atmosphere, strong wind shear, and abundant moisture streaming into the nation's midsection from the Gulf. Is anyone noticing any unusual heat occurring down there around America right now? Well, of course not. That's because they're not going to say forecasters attributed this to owning the weather by 2025. And they can't give you a reasonable excuse, but they've programmed you into thinking that these weird weather patterns and weird weather behaviors are all because of carbon emissions. And it goes deeper than that, of course, with climate change and the whole purpose of that and how eventually they're going to critique your behavior and where you go, what you buy, what you're allowed to consume, what you're allowed to put in your body will all be under the government's dictatorship where they tell you can't eat meat anymore because it's healthy for you. Instead, you got to eat things that they grow in a petri dish. Ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing catastrophic weather modification so far in 2025, of course under Donald Trump's watch, because the people out there who used to scream about HAARP won't scream about it now because Donald Trump is the president. And instead, they'll defend their president because they're in a cult or a tribe, whatever you want to call it. And since then, we've seen nothing but chaos since January. We've seen the death of the stock market. We've seen AI governance being ushered in. We see them talking about curing the blind, all these things that they plan on doing, cancer vaccines, and nobody's listening or paying attention to this stuff that's going on with the weather, right? You don't hear anything about Helene or any of these hurricanes that devastated the South already in the last couple of months. You don't hear anything about the fires, the man-made fires in Los Angeles. And that's exactly what this is. You can look at this as a specific bullseye. They're herding people out of these areas, whether they're areas that they farm in or areas that they want to move the civilians out of and then build in. You'll never hear stories of how, construction is beginning in Arkansas and they're going to put in this smart city or something like that, or whatever happens to the actual people. When it comes to the weather events, they just move on. They just stop talking about it so it goes away, just like Lahaina, just like LA, just like the hurricanes in the Carolinas and Tennessee and Florida. They just stop talking about it. So you, stop talking about it, because this entire system of control is based on mind control and manipulation. And the weather patterns that they have are endless. They're endless. And for people out there to say, oh, this stuff is, this is conspiracy, when you can look up the patents themselves, and these are all patented by the government, not by the guy up the road, not by me, by your government. Cloud seeding, carbon dioxide bullet. I mean, you go through the list of these things. Weather modification methods, right? How to control the weather. Method of generating silver iodide smoke. Method of crystal formation and precipitation. All these government operations that are out there, from Operation Popeye to so many others, where they've openly talked about and admitted to weather modification. They even tell you now that they can make it rain, right? And it shows you how dumb people have gotten in this world. They tell you, hey, in Dubai, they have droughts, but they cloud seed and can make it rain. So in people's minds, something should click and they should go, oh, wow, yeah, they can make it rain. So then guess what they should think automatically? Is anyone with common sense know? Well, you should say to yourself, well, then there should never be droughts again. So should we never worry about crops not growing or things like that? Well, they don't want you to think like that, right? And they certainly don't want you to think that, wait, if they can make it rain, then when there's abnormal weather events, can they create hurricanes? Can they create all these things with these wind turbines and other things they tell you do one thing, but really serve a different purpose, like the 5G towers? Can they do that? Can they maneuver and steer all these things? Well, of course they can. If you saw Bill Nye create a simulation on his show of a tornado, well, here's how you create a tornado inside of a little studio, and all of a sudden you see him putting in air and you see it start spiraling up. Why wouldn't you think they could do it on a mass scale? And why would you think that these people would want to learn these things and patent these things if they weren't going to use them? Are you the kind of person who sits at home and sees a tornado and goes, I'd like to make one of those. Maybe I'll figure out how to make one first in my backyard. Then I'm going to patent it. Only think somebody would slap you upside the head and say, why in the world would you want to make one? What good comes out of that? You sound like a psychopath. Well, of course you would. That's why it's funny on these science shows where they show you how they can do these things and create these things and simulate these things, that nobody thinks further than that. Nobody goes, well, why would you want to simulate one? And they go, well, because we want to just show you how it's done, how science works. Instead of going, the fact that human beings who don't have any authority know how to do this, call themselves scientists, are doing this stuff, should make you think, especially based on the behavior of the governments around the earth right now, should make you think, wow, they could actually create this on a mass scale with all of this stuff, with electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic frequencies, that they could do this on a mass scale. Well, would you sit there and think for a second, would they do it? Well, I don't know. What do you think? They just tried to kill off and commit a mass genocide, and they did kill off a lot of people. They did just force you to lose your job and stay home. They did just cause people lots of, as they call it, mental health problems. They traumatized children, making people stranger and stranger, who we see still outside walking around with diapers on their face. I mean, you don't think these same people would use weather to kill you? And remember, in the teachings of a lot of these people, like their books, I think it starts with the word protocols of something of somewhere. They love to talk about how they, a murder and a death, all these things, if it's not directly done by them, in other words, if they don't come up to you and stab you with a knife, then they're not responsible for it. That's how they teach. This is their thinking, right? So if they create something and say, okay, we're going to put poison inside of this little veil here, and people come and put it in their body willingly, we're not responsible. That's on them for being idiots, right? Same thing with the weather modification. Well, people aren't prepared. People don't go underneath their home or have tornadoes. Well, they don't care. It's inadvertent. We're just picking the locations that we want to pick. We have a map of all the places we want to wipe out, and bada bing, bada boom, they do it. So you could see by the patterns in the weather that this is not normal. For anyone out there that goes, well, this guy's just saying that it's every storm is weather modification. Well, guess what? If it rains in Oklahoma tomorrow, I'm not going to do a video and say it rained in Oklahoma, it must be weather modification, right? But if you see weather patterns that aren't normal, like a storm sitting and hitting the same location, as they even say out of their own mouths, for 4 days in a row, considered to be rare that the same city in at least a 3 out of 5 severe weather risk has it for 4 consecutive days. Well, when you see strange patterns, you should look at it and say, well, that's not right. Kind of like a detective looks at things, right? If you were solving a crime, you'd say, hey, I noticed that there's 4 girls killed in this town. Well, okay, well, did you notice any type of strange behavior? Well, they're all blonde. Okay, They're all blonde, right? Oh, they all got blue eyes. Oh, okay, there's a pattern there. Well, have you noticed the pattern of these storms, whether it's the hurricanes from a couple months ago or the tornado blizzards I reported on a month ago? That it's not normal, that in human history this has never occurred? That Tornado Alley, they're claiming, is now moved from where it once was located and is shifted east. And on top of that, it's not even tornado season, and we're getting all these tornadoes just popping up all over the place. And you don't think that they could create it? Really? I mean, you probably don't want to believe that they can do it, but guess what? They can, and they are. And you should look at the government, no matter who's president, and understand they're working together, keeping you distracted and divided, and using silent weapons for quiet wars like weather modification to do all of these things. They tell you themselves in their documents, like weather as a force multiplier, or all the patents that they have, including specific ones about how to create tornadoes and hurricanes, or listening to presidents past talk about how they were in a race to control the weather. Well, what do you think? That he was just speaking out of his rear end 80 years ago? Ever since then, you never heard anything about it. Well, how did that race go, right? Well, why do you think you never heard? Hey, I heard JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson once talk about controlling the weather and weather modification. Whatever happened with that? Oh, you'll never hear them talk about it. You'll never hear the Daily Wire talk about it. You'll never hear Russell Brand or any of the alt-right media talk. Nobody will talk about it. The government themselves won't talk about it. They'll just say, oh, that's crazy conspiracy mumbo jumbo, because that type of mind control gets the sheeple out there to automatically dismiss even thinking that the former presidents talked about controlling and owning the weather, and he who could do it could control the world. Well, guess what? These corporations know how to do it, and they control it. And it's all these wicked psychopaths who are the heads of corporations who work with these politicians who are doing this to all of us. My prayers go out to everybody in the line of fire. And I've said this before. People see this stuff and they're like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. I don't live in Arkansas. I don't live in Oklahoma. I would never live down there, because they get stuff like this. It's coming everywhere. It's coming everywhere. Are you going to be surprised if there's tornadoes in Vermont in a couple months, a couple years, or Maine, and people believe it and don't go weather modification? Well, of course they will. They could target wherever they want. They got these towers up everywhere. They have their NEXRAD all over the place. And eventually they plan on doing this to all of us. My prayers to everybody affected, their families, and I hope everybody out there wakes up to all this stuff and stops thinking that these things are conspiracies, because they're not. This has nothing to do with left or right. These people have the technology. You can watch football on a toilet on a phone. You don't think that they have the ability to do this stuff? You can go on the internet. You don't even know what it is. What are you hooked up to? How is it working so fast? How can you just type this in and this shows up and that information shows up? Because these things you can't see, the prince of the power of the air, Satan himself, controls the electromagnetic field, the electromagnetic radiation that they use, has the ability to do all of these things that you can't see with the human eye. And they're doing it right now. People need to band together and wake up to all this stuff. I pray for everybody out there affected, and I pray for everybody in the future who may be affected, that they stay safe and that God shelters them and protects them and their families. I thank all of you for being here. Hope you're all well. God bless you and your families as always. And remember, it's a once in a generational weather event. Every couple of years, of course.